Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and also to our audience who are joining us via Facebook. Good evening to you. My name is Dennis Zaire. I'm a Senior Program Manager for the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. And tonight I will be co-moderating this event together with my colleague, Claudia Gosso, who is seated to the extreme left. May I now first introduce the panel, and then before that we can move on with the program. To my immediate left, I've got Mr. Maungura Kavihuha from the Teachers Union of Namibia. On his immediate left, he is joined by Ms. Eda Bon, the Deputy Executive Director for the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture. And then to her immediate left, we are joined by Lucia Dishishi, the President of Namibia National Student Organization, NANSO in short. And of course, we are joined by my co-moderator, Claudia Gosso, who is also a co-program manager for the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. Good evening and welcome to our panelists. We are also joined on my immediate left, on my immediate right by Selma, who will be joining us very shortly. She will be doing the sign language interpretation. So Selma, you're welcome. And then to move on with the program, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to welcome the director of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation to formally welcome you before we can continue with the discussion.
Thank you very much, Sarita. I think I have to mute it on now. Is it fine now? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Saira. Advocate Basilius Jacua, Ombudsman of Namibia. Dr. Alfred van Kent, Executive Director at the Ministry of Higher Education, Technology and Innovation. Dr. Lishu Mundia, Director Research, Innovation Development at the Ministry of Higher Education, Technology and Innovation. Dr. Shihimimeka Sadrak Panduleni, I hope I pronounce it more or less correctly, Head of Department for the Higher Education and Lifelong Learning. Ms. Rachel Philander, Senior Education Officer at the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture. Dr. Michael Chivikua, Educational Specialist at the FHT Training College. The list is really long. Ms. Sennet Steenkamp, Secretary at the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture, represented by Ms. Eda Bone, Deputy Executive Director at the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture. Mr. Mahongora Kaviua, Secretary General of the Teachers Union Namibia. Ms. Lucia Ndishishi, President of Namibia's National Students Organization, NANSO. Mr. Cliff Oliver, Director of Taxine. Dear guests and also participants who are joining us this evening online via Facebook, on live, members of the media houses, and especially also I would like to greet our sign language interpreter, Selma Moses. All protocol observed, and a very good evening or afternoon and a warm welcome to our today's public debate at the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. Well, if I see you around, I'm really proud to see that so many participants joined us today to this very important and relevant discussion. Indeed, education is key to development. Education is a primary tool to reduce poverty in Namibia. Education is a long-term investment for a better future of Namibia. We might compare it with the seed that we plant. If we do it correctly, nicely, in a right place, find the accurate environment, maintain it and take care for it with water, sun, and so forth, then it will grow and hopefully carry lots of sweet fruits. Maybe one can compare education to this picture. Ladies and gentlemen, recently we heard a lot about education, a lot of complaint about the nation's disastrous education system. So I just would like to highlight on a few points. There are not enough schools and teachers employed. Teachers are not qualified. The classrooms and facilities are in a bad condition. Learners go hungry to school, or they have to struggle to find transport. Learners didn't meet the qualification for the tertiary system. The results of the class 12 or the 12th class is not really representable. Only a few of them are qualified for the tertiary system. The education provided at university does not fulfill the needs and qualification at the job market. There's a big gap between demand on the job market and what's produced out of the education system. We may just think about computing, EI, ICT, maybe also the way how we teach, the methodology. Maybe it's outdated. Maybe we have to find other ways. Hence, many graduate students remain jobless and contribute to the high level of employment rate. And this, of course, at the end, contributes to poverty. Ladies and gentlemen, TVET program is a promising, not alternative, but another way of education. And it contributes also to the education in generally. So to say, university is not the only way to study. And one cannot emphasize enough that it is a source of qualification and employment, but it's yet still on the stage of development. Well, this list of complaints, I'm sure that within this discussion we will find more points to add. It's really long. Namibia's government is aware of the situation and got this wake-up call urgently to do something about it. The question might be, is government doing enough? And secondly, is it doing the right thing to uplift the education system? This is also a topic we might find out more about it during the discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, the Finance Minister, Honorable Ipumbu Shimbi, just tabled the 2023-2024 fiscal year budget, amounting 84.6 billion Namibian dollar. This is higher than last year's budget, and it's the highest he ever tabled. So, and one must see that the biggest taker from this huge budget is the Ministry of Education. He allocated 16.7 billion Namibian dollar. This covers the teachers' recruitment, class renovation, capacitating both universities, and even more. Ladies and gentlemen, I would really like to emphasize on this number. Education takes 20% of the entire country's budget. That's equal to almost 10% of the country's GDP. And I would say that is really a strong signal and statement from the government who puts the importance on education. But it also means that this money has to spend very wisely because it's a huge amount. Allocating such much investment to education is definitely the right move. But what about the effectiveness? Will it pay out later on in future? We don't know. We will see. Ladies and gentlemen, talking about education, we shall not just think in terms of school, universities. The focus on the importance of education shall start from the early childhood. We also have to include the parental part. And later on, it continues with professional skill developments. Even in the professional or business environment, learning continues. Even me, I learn every day something new. So we call it nowadays lifelong learning. Ladies and gentlemen, today we will reflect on Namibia's education system by having also a look to a globalized world that requires a high standard of education. Namibia has to compete globally in many areas with other nations. In this context, allow me to throw two questions to the debate before I hand over to my colleague, Mr. Zaire. What is the purpose of education to Namibia as a country, and what does it mean to a Namibian child? How does Namibia's education system align with the country's priorities, and how does it assist to the country's development plans, Harambee, Vision 2030, and we have many more. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad that we have the expert on my side to give us their input to the discussions and to guide us through. Feel free to discuss the matter, but also not just complain and describe the situation, but also looking at solutions. Since this is a public debate, and education should not be just remain the work of the government. It needs interest, commitments, and effort from all of us. Yeah, without further ado, I thank you very much, and I'm wishing us a lovely evening with a lot of inputs and discussions, and also keen to hear what we are about to discuss. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fru Rusman, for your insightful input and contribution, and of course, warm welcome. I think before I hand over to my colleague, I think at this juncture, I also need to announce that we also have a fourth panelist. He's unable to be with us tonight because he's up in the north in Kurinkuru. He's an education specialist. However, because of network problems, he could also not send the audio, but he has sent his speech. So at that juncture, I'm going to read the speech, also to provoke the discussions as well, and also to make contribution to the discussion. So I will hand over now to my colleague, Claudia, to move on to the next point. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Very much appreciated as well. I just want to, again, reflect on the remarks tonight. Allocating investment means what we should ask ourselves, what is the purpose of education to enhance socioeconomic development and economic growth in Namibia? And I believe what better way to reflect and dive into this topic that the country is currently highlighting, and what is the future of Namibia's education? And we would like to consult with the experts that have so wonderfully agreed to be here with us tonight and share their insights. And aside from the challenges that have already been highlighted in the media and also on other spaces, social media especially, that is becoming more increasing platform to talk on, we would like to then find out also from our experts and their institutions what some of their challenges are, the activities that the institutions are busy with, the programs, and to tackle this disastrous education challenge that we face in Namibia. And of course, as already mentioned in the remarks, the government is taking steps, and the institutions we have invited to participate and the education specialists are sure to tell us a little bit more about what is the future hold for Namibia's education system. We are again once glad to have Ms. Selma on board as well, to make sure that we do not only reach the audience on Facebook as usual during our debates, but also persons with hearing impairments. And yes, we would like to include as many as possible in our public debate, whether in the room tonight with us or on Facebook. So we like to make sure that your thoughts count. And with that, we are then going to start off the debate of this evening. Just to take you briefly through the program, we have, as my colleague Dennis has already mentioned, 3 panelists on board here. Mr. Zaire, my colleague, is also going to then share some insights from the panelists that is unable to join us this evening. And following that, through each panelist's insights, we will then have at least 20 minutes allocated for the open floor discussion. As I know, we always have a lot to ask and comment, and we will keep the presentations and insights from the panelists as short as possible. I think they are quite well prepared, as we have seen so far. So yes, let's dive right in. So one of the first topics that we would like to address in this debate is to assess the constitutional foundation of Namibia's education framework, because as we know, the Constitution of Namibia in Article 20 focuses their concerns primarily on primary education, and the higher education also has a role to play, and this is according to Article 28 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. So we want to find out from the Ministry of Education now, from Ms. Edarbon, the following. We want to find out how is the ministry ensuring Namibia's education system is aligning with global standards. In that context, we also want to see, in terms of the 2022 Poor School Performance, from the ministry's perspective, what were some of the challenges in the ministry's perspective and the causes of this worrisome predicament. So perhaps we could hand over to Ms. Edarbon now to answer that for us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Are we here? Thank you, Claudia. Can you hear me?
Yes. Loud and clear.
Thank you so much. Yes, it is indeed an honor to be amongst the colleagues here of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation and all stakeholders in education, and education that includes, the higher education, technology and innovation, but also then from where I come, arts and culture. So yes, the ministry ensures to be globally competitive through the agencies that we are working with. Number one, of course, we don't work in isolation. We are affiliated to the AU and also through the UN. You mentioned the UN Convention. So we are a part of the United Nations, and through the individual agencies, whether it's for educational research or planning or UNESCO, UNICEF and others, we do participate in the global dialogue and ensure that our education standards are, remain competitive at a global level. So there are formal structures in place globally, continentally, but also in the region, in the SADC region. We have the education, the SADC framework for education, and that is, those are the instruments through which we ensure to remain relevant and competitive. Yes, for us in education, arts and culture, it is our mandate to educate and train for sustainable national development and arts and culture. But how do we do it? We commit to give equitable access to inclusive education for all, to actually develop a tolerant, skilled and productive nation which is able to promote and preserve its arts and culture, for nationhood, and unity in diversity. So all these elements speak to what we are actually aiming for. And there are bigger frameworks, yes, our national development plans, the Vision 2030, but also then under the current administration, they have Harambee prosperity plans. And all of these highlight, again, our vision to become a developed country. And to become a developed country, of course, all rests on knowledge and skills. So that is where we articulate. And the ministry also takes cognizance in the various directorates and operational levels of the most current research. For example, in neuroscience, we know that importance of ECD, that the child's or a future citizen's potential is developed from the early ages on. We even know from conception to birth, including the first 1,000 days, are most essential for cognitive development and skills development further. So that is where we come in with early interventions, detecting learning difficulties or barriers, to capacitate our teachers to be able to overcome or to build the bridges for the child to unlock and the learner to unlock their potential. So that is one way. Of course, there are other frameworks and policies in place that guide our operations. What is most current also that we hear from day to day, the reports on violence, gender-based violence, and violence in general, as well as the social evils that we are referring to. So what we have developed in 2018 is a national framework for school safety, the Safe Schools Framework. And this framework leans on another policy document in the ministry, which is already long living, one could say, and those are the national standards and performance indicators for schools. Those policies were developed with the aim to uplift all schools to the same standard and to ensure that schools are equipped to really do their situational analysis, their school self-evaluation, to identify their weaknesses and come up with plans and strategies to improve. So these are some of the instruments, and if we now say these instruments should ensure that the resources provided by the government, by the ministry, and by stakeholders and interested parties are well utilized, as you were saying. The investment to education is well utilized. So as the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture, and I think as every citizen in the country really welcomed the national budget delivered and the budget speech delivered by Honorable Shimi, where he reiterated that it is based on the 3 pillars of pro-sustainability, in a pro-poor manner, and a pro-growth. Because this is what we all want. We want to see a sustainable effort. We all realize, us in education, that the Sustainable Development Goals, that is preserving our natural resources and environment, preserving the globe, our home, for generations to come, would only be possible through sustainable development. And sustainable development can only be reached if education is successful. So that we embrace that, and these are cross-cutting themes that are worked into the curriculum and make sure that we remain relevant. There are also policies and procedures in the ministry that ensure a pro-poor resource allocation, as well as then monitoring of the resources. But also on the reverse side, we acknowledge that teaching and learning can only happen in a conducive environment when, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is satisfied, that, our children are well fed, and only then they can thrive mentally and academically. So there is the Namibia school feeding program, but we also realized that through the interruptions of COVID, that interrupted school feeding, it interrupted, the livelihood of many households, this, irrespective of interrupted school. I mean, the curriculum, teaching and learning was interrupted. So all of that, again, had a negative effect on growth. So we really embraced this refocus on revival and pro-growth, because that is what we all want for our nation and our learners. So what I just, in addition to what was highlighted on the budget, what I wanted to add on, we observed that education gets 20.6 billion. Altogether, that is combined, both ministries and SOEs. So that leads us to a 24% of national budget, which we embrace and really celebrate. And what we also need to recognize is that of that actually is 28.4% is allocated for actually employment creation, recruiting, more people into the profession. We are aware of the unemployed teachers, so there are millions availed to recruit teachers and to alleviate the unemployment in the education sector. What we also recognize is that, in particular in education, arts and culture, in our portion of the 16.78 billion, of that proportion there is a 3.4% allocated for development budget. And that gives us a 577 million. So that is a remarkable allocation compared to the past, and we really have the plans in place already through the accelerated infrastructure plan to make good use of this funding. Now you might still ask, but knowing that the foundation is to be strengthened, that's ECD and pre-primary, how much goes actually of the national budget, that's now the education budget, to these sectors. So ECD is currently funded from gender equality, poverty eradication, and social welfare, and there we also see that they have an increase, and especially the grant funding is increased. The grant funding for individual orphans and vulnerable children, but also grant funding for providing ECD care and education. Why we are still planning to take over the kindergarten age of the 3 to 4-year-olds. 5 to 6 are already with us in the pre-primary, so the education quality delivery for ECD, that is the portion that, the quality assurance, that is the portion that is going to come to education, arts and culture. Yes, and then we also are aware that the primary education is, in terms of numbers, the largest group of the 839,000 learners, and they get a 66%, secondary gets 24%, and then the remaining sectors get their very small percentages. But what is really to be also recognized in this context of social development is that the arts and culture sector has also received a top-up. In some areas it has been increased with up to 40%. So in general, that wraps it up, what I have to, or what I've prepared to say now. And for all of us, we need to embrace and create a new vision and hope for our children. Vision and hope, and that there is a future, because COVID and the pain that we went through has brought about this gloomy, doomy, atmosphere, and that is why the motto of revival is so important to everyone, not just, in the big political space, but for every household and every individual and every interhuman relationship. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Eda. We appreciate your insights. I hope I'm still clearly audible. I think I'm just struggling a little bit with this device around my head. Yes, also for our Facebook users that have in the past week been very excited for this debate coming up. We've had individuals from the private learning institutions and also primary educators in the rural deep villages running schools, as well as homeschooling representatives come on board to say what is being done to make education inclusive. And I'm glad to hear embracing the refocus on revival and pro-growth is on the plan for the ministry, and we are looking forward to getting an update on some of those plans, Eda. So do please keep us posted, and also for the audience, perhaps we can give the floor to them shortly. I just want to also find out in terms of primary education, and this is not a question directly to you for now, Eda. I want to pose it as an open question. How are persons with disabilities in Namibia also considered in these plans going forward when we talk about pro-growth and revival? And of course, for future debates, we can also look at the digital space, because we all know that the world is progressing, and of course, in terms of global standards, Namibia needs to catch up quite a bit when it comes to the digital era, and training its teachers in computers and so forth. So we are looking forward to see what is on the agenda for the ministry in that regard. So thank you very much, Eda. Let us then, with that, open the floor for questions and comments. As we've mentioned, we've got more space and time this time around in our debate. So we've got also a roving mic, as I understand, in the room. Yes, thank you, NMH, for the wonderful service so far. We really appreciate your assistance. Let us take some questions and then take it from there. Yeah.
Maybe while you're brainstorming, I could maybe pose the first question, just while the audience are still preparing themselves. In the context of what you have just articulated now, what is the ministry's perspective in terms of the disconnect between the results of, for instance, last year and the output that we are intending to achieve as a country? And how could we perhaps achieve sustainable effort if our output are still wanting? Yeah.
Take it right now? Yeah. To come in there, yes, it has always been a big debate, and we see that the investment per learner, per phase, is distorted. For example, at the I alluded to ECD and pre-primary, and then we have primary. On paper it's 66, but when you divide the large number of learners into that budget, and that carries, yes, all utilities, all teacher salaries and everything, then you come to, a mere 15,000 Namibian dollar per annum per child. This is based on the analysis of 2017 Public Expenditure Review, followed by a larger proportion at secondary, but not that significant large. It's only 16,000 or so. So whereas at pre-primary, it's only just above 1,000, and at ECD per child per annum, it's only $264. And there are researches done, as well as in Namibia ourselves. We did the analysis, the cost of inaction. And we are currently the victims with our grade 11 and 12 results, the ordinary as well as the AS level results. We are the victims of, the school leavers, of this distorted investment. Because if you look at the cohort who had access to AS level, were at 8,000. And when you track back the numbers, how many were in pre-primary? There were 8,000. So that just gives you the correlation. And the research proven again that the investment at earlier ages is more important. That set aside, we must recognize that our final years, those are the 11 and 10 and 11, that is the senior secondary, preparing for the ordinary, had prior to that grade 9. Grade 9 was the first year of the COVID outbreak. They had, when, you know, the junior secondary around is laying a foundation to be successful at senior secondary. That foundation was interrupted. Of the 194 school days, they did not even had 100 days. So they were severely affected. They had the biggest learning loss in terms of contact sessions. And the ministry was also not able to, you know, deploy the resources to make e-learning a reality for the Namibian school-going child. So the learners of ours in all areas. So only the most urban and connected schools were able to access the online learning. So the majority of learners could not catch up the way they were supposed to. There were at policy level discussions whether we were supposed to suspend an entire year and repeat an entire year. But then you create a bottleneck at the bottom again, at the foundation phase, where learners would enter too late again into the system. That is an equal dilemma, including or exacerbated by the dilemma of not having an output for tertiary. So the policy decision of the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture, together with the Ministry of Higher Education, Innovation, Technology and Innovation, was let's pull through with all the pain and difficulties that we have had during COVID and make the best of it. And we really appreciate what the higher education sector has done in strengthening the bridging programs and adjusting the entry requirements in such a way that they could admit as many as possible. And what we have also learned from the most recent feedback that is not yet documented for statistical purpose is that the enrollments are a lot higher. And that is exactly what we wanted. We want to push up throughput to senior secondary. We are attacked on the curriculum, but please keep in mind, beforehand, we had the JSC, the Junior Secondary Certificate, and the Junior Secondary Certificate served two purposes. That was giving you a qualification to enter, the less desirable job category in government, from, worker to admin officer, and compared to what we aspire for, our Vision 2030 says we should all have completed our school career in full and then pursue a meaningful tertiary education to become, a knowledge-based economy that can generate resources and income. So we have to keep that in mind, that JSC had to be phased out because there was just no more, it did not fit into our philosophy and into what we had on available in public service. So just to bring this to a conclusion, that is why we eliminated the JSC, and all learners go to ordinary level. That means going to ordinary level, it's a greater throughput, and we still suffer of a not solid foundation, as I've alluded to, and because of the limited resources, we cannot forever repeat. Repeating a grade is not a solution. That is why we have learning support and what I said, early intervention programs that enable or need to enable learners to catch up and meet the requirements.
I think, okay, we have one more question here. And also the back. We are going to take these 3 questions. First one here, second one, keep your number, and the third one, and the fourth one. And then we move on to the next item. Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you so much for the opportunity. I would like to first thank Madam Edabon for you explaining the budget. I think that's where we needed to understand where it actually goes to or where it's utilized. I have 2 questions. The first one is about, I actually look at the curriculum and I thought by now it will be modified in tandem with students with disabilities. Yeah, because that's where we need to look at the deaf kids in the curriculum. I don't think it's modified to enable them to pass properly. That's the first question. The second point that I would like to ask is regarding, we mentioned that there's a high failure rate in our country. So I'm now thinking perhaps maybe we need to relook at where the causes of the failure rate are. Because many times we are saying the kids shouldn't repeat, they must be automatically be promoted to the next grade. And I think we are not laying a correct foundation for them, because by the time they get to a higher grade, they have not really acquired much of what they need to acquire, and they end up failing. So how are we going to change, or perhaps change the status quo of automatic promotions? Because I think they don't understand the grade 1, or they don't have the learning outcomes of grade 1. We promote them to grade 2, and so it continues. And I don't think we expect them to pass at the end of the day, because that's where we need to try and sort out the problem of the high failure rate.
Thank you very much. We can go to number 2, and could you please keep your questions straight and short to the point so that we can accommodate more people?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. My name is Adelaide Avasis, former Director of Planning in the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture. I'm privileged to be here. I acknowledge the summaries that were given by the country director in terms of key issues, but also in terms of what Ms. Edabon has outlined in terms of our global competitiveness. I want to link up my comment and observation to the previous speaker, Selma. I think the fundamental problem that we have in the sector is how to deal with internal inefficiencies, such as the high dropout rates, repetition, as well as external inefficiencies that has to deal with how we are using the resources that we are given. So when we talk about capacity building, it should not just be in terms of the teachers, but the education planners themselves. Whether it is planners in the Ministry of Education or planners in the Regional Council, this capacitating is fundamental to the transformation of the education sector. With this, I will stop. I would have elaborated more, but if there is time, I would thank you.
Thank you. I think your question is quite clear. Question number 3 at the back.
All right, thank you very much. My name is George Kambala. I just want to add on to the previous speaker, because you're almost speaking the same language. Because the issue that we have here is that we're investing a lot, but then the returns are not satisfying. But then again, my question comes in terms of quality assurance, in terms of the ministry itself. What are we spending on quality assurance and in infrastructure development? Because now you just mentioned that now we spend on about $500 million this coming year towards infrastructure development. But I'm asking then what has happened in the past? Why are we where we are right now? We know the bottlenecks. I think you have been in the ministry for almost over 10 years, but we still can't be repeating the same message that no, we spend this much, but then in terms of now, where we all know where the bottlenecks are. For example, in terms of quality assurance and M&E, what are we doing in those two departments to ensure that the previous results don't repeat themselves? That's my concern. Yeah.
Thank you, George. Let's move on to the fourth one. I see we have 2 more here at the front. We will accommodate you shortly.
All right, thank you for the opportunity.
Excuse me, before you do that, maybe you can introduce yourself, your name for the audience.
Okay, my name is Theopolina Shikongo. Thank you for the opportunity. My question basically is, seeing the aims of the new curriculum and seeing that it aims for development, industrialization, and all of this, are we then saying that the new curriculum is not feasible or credible within the rural areas where there's inadequate school facilities and things such as computers and also lack of resources? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe we can take these two and then we can allow Eda to come.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Aman Aufiku. I'm the manager responsible for the development of TVET standard at the Namibia Training Authority. I think for me, I have 2-3 questions here, or just maybe some additions. Maybe in terms of the quality of our training or from the basic educations. The one critical aspect is the teacher-learner ratio. We are not maintaining to the teacher-learner ratio. If you look at even from the primary, you'll find that they are overclouded. And then the teacher could not be able to control and pay attention to the individual the learners. So that's a very challenging, already that we need to address as a country. Also looking at the budget that we are given. And the other aspect is the continuous professional development of teachers, especially even when the curriculum was revised or reformed. I'm not sure if the teachers were taken through on the new curriculum, just for them to understand. So those are some of the critical aspects and then the third one is the contextualizations. Many times we go and benchmark to other countries, but we take out those examples as they are from those countries and we come and implement. But what I always tell people is that Namibia, we are very unique in our nature. So whatever that we learn from outside there, we should come and contextualize in our own context. And the practical example that I would wanted to give is that if we look at the reform currently, that what happened is that the removal of grade 10 from the combined, it created challenges because it took us back where we came from. We were addressing the issue of access. Now learners have to travel long distances, and that already jeopardized the quality of training and learning and et cetera. So I think those are some of the things that we need to look at, because when we benchmark from countries like Europe, Europeans, their setup is not like ours, because in their context is that they have, like, for example, community hostels. In Windhoek here, there could be a lot of community hostels where kids are, scattered around and they can be taken with the buses. But in our context, our hostels are set up in such a way that a hostel is linked to a particular school, and only learners of that particular school that will be staying in there. So those are the challenges that we're having as a from you.
Thank you. Final one, please.
Good evening. My name is Henry Kapalu. I'm a parent. I was just listening carefully to what the ED has just been presenting. I think the elephant in the room is we understand the problem. We understand the problem. But our problem is we think when there's a problem, you throw more money and you'll solve the problem. ED, I think we have done this for the past 30 years. In the region, Namibia, we are the best in terms of how much money we put into education. Maybe now is the time to pause and reflect. If I ask you today, there's so much assumptions, narrative as to what, why, this and that. People do analysis in the newspaper, but beyond the newspaper articles, ED, do we have a methodical, scientific opinion on these issues? Because I can tell you, we can go for another 30 years and put billions. We have put billions. I concur with Kambala there, my brother there. The problem is not the money. We don't know the problem. Until we tell it all, the way we tell learners in school that do research, we must do a research. Because as we speak now, we say there's been a research. Who has done research? And where is that research? Can I get that paper today, a journal, to say, this is the analysis for the past 10 years. Can you give me that paper? Not the newspaper articles we read every day. Those are just assumptions. So maybe going forward, of course we have the money, which is okay, it's a blessing, but we need to sit down and have a methodical paper to address why we are where we are. And going forward, we'll continue talking. Thank you so much.
Maybe while you're still there, maybe some food for thought also is that This brings into the equation, what is the role of the parents? Do we as parents contribute enough to the education, development, and value? Do we add value to the education system? Do we play our part to help our children with homework and so on? That is one. Number two, how many conferences and workshops did we not have since independence? Where are those recommendations? Have they been implemented? If they have been implemented, what are the outputs? And those recommendations that did not work, do we know them and why are they not working? So I think we have got a lot of critical introspections to do, but the key question also is, where do we start? But I think with these kind of platforms, this is where we are adding value. So I think, let me allow Etta to touch some of the few points, and maybe also be very briefly taking into account that we need to also move on to the next question, but we are also going to open up a floor for interventions and as well at a later stage. Thank you.
Okay, good. First of all, to Mr. Paul, how disability friendly is our education system, our curriculum? We have approved the curriculum framework for inclusive education, and we have also successfully submitted our certificate program, is now registered on the NQF at level 1. That is the certificate program for the basic pre-vocational skills subjects that are offered in the resource schools. So that is a major milestone of 2022, that they are now certificate. These learners going through that will be awarded with a certificate. The high failure rate, yes, touching on to the last speaker's intervention also and the research. Now, in order to achieve results, you know, and most of us who work in education here, the two of us at least, we were teachers. So what gives you results? Just analyze that, back to basics. What gives you results? Is a teacher who teaches, is in good relation with the learners, has access to good materials. The learners feel safe and comfortable in the setting, recognized, acknowledged, treasured, valued. So these are the things that drive results. Now, if we cannot ensure those prerequisites, all of us, so us from quality assurance, yes. Do we quality assure the teaching and learning in a classroom? Who is the first person who has to quality assure the teaching and learning happening in a classroom? Who's the first one? It's the parent and the head of department, or the senior teacher in the school setting, depending on how many heads of department, if the school qualifies for a head of department and the like. Who's the next one who has to quality assure? The school principal and the community, the school board. And thereafter is the inspector of education. And I appreciated so much what Mr. Haufiku said, the contextualization of, settings and interventions. We have failed to contextualize the inspection, school inspection, quality assurance, when the government adopted the job regrading and evaluation. The school inspectors were downgraded to head of department level. We objected, we appealed, and they were lifted to the school principal level. That undermined, you build a Jenga tower, and it pulled out most of the bottom bricks. That is our quality assurance that we were doing in schools. So we are now there. We have the new act. The new Education Act is signed off by His Excellency, but it's not yet operational because of some flaws in or discussions still ongoing on the regulations. But there we stipulate, again, quality assurance. Now we are there where we would abolish an inspector position and create a quality assurance position. So that in itself is a challenge. But there you see where something has gone totally wrong due to the fact of not contextualizing. Elsewhere in the world, you do not have education inspectors at all. And that is what informed our job evaluation and regrading. So those are things that we are suffering of. Those are facts, research proven. You can go and discover what made us produce results. Yes, there was an inspection from time to time. Now we have self-evaluation. We have grown independent. We should be able to evaluate ourselves against what? Yes, there should be peer evaluation. There should be regional peer evaluation and so on. So this is just one element, and it touches on various questions and contributions made. Thank you, Ms. Abases, for the contribution on the planning and the internal and external efficiency. And just to come back to the first comment also, the high failure rate and the M&E and Q&A, that's monitoring, evaluation, and quality assurance. Just to come back to that is, we must manage to get it right the first time. Each one of our own. When you think of yourself, how many failures in your own life would you tolerate for yourself, isn't it? So how can we tolerate out of a group of 100 children? These 100 children are individuals whom we need to inspire and give a hope in life. How can you have 20 of them repeat? You know, they get a knock on their self-confidence, which they carry on for life. Some of them ask you in their first year, do I have to repeat it again? While they actually do qualify to go on. So that is where the ministry is now heavily investing in getting the foundation right in jolly phonics and early numeracy in order to enable us to get the foundation right, eliminate repetition. Because if you get ECD pre-primary and the first 3 years right, if you can get the basics right, early literacy and numeracy, the rest should follow. But provided all the other elements are there as well. CPD, yes, continuous professional development for our teachers, the teacher-learner ratio, I fully agree. Those are the challenges we are sitting with. I think I leave it there.
Thank you, Eda. Thank you very much. I think you also answered 2 or 3 of our Facebook users' questions. We were having an active discussion there about inclusive education for persons with disabilities, particularly looking at epilepsy, autism, doesn't really always work in a classroom setting. So what is being done to address learning for these children, and with the certificate that you mentioned for level 1 that has now been introduced, I think that is already a good step going forward. And of course, there's a lot more one can talk about in that domain. It's quite an expensive exercise when we talk about inclusive education. And yes, let's see what our stakeholders in Namibia are coming up with in that regard. There are a lot of conversations going on in the country at this stage, behind the scenes with the key stakeholders. So for individuals interested in that topic, please keep your eyes on active discussions in the country. Inform yourself through our Facebook page, and also key stakeholders like the ministry. I think with that we can then continue. Mr. Dennis, would you like to have the pleasure to introduce our next panelist?
Thank you very much. The next panelist is Dr. Michael Chivikwa. This is the panelist who will not be able to join us. So he has sent a speech that I'm going to read to convey his message for tonight. Maybe also for the background of the audience, I want to quickly and briefly give a short summary profile of Dr. Chivikwa. He's an education specialist. Dr. Chivikwa is an education specialist and academic who brings with a wealth of knowledge and experience from the previous position he held at academic institutions as Director of Teaching and Learning, lecturer, and also Director of Research at the University of Namibia. He also has been devoted to education reform initiatives and policy development to improve teaching and learning and the attainment of better education, better outcomes in the system. He was the director of the Center for Teaching and Learning at Namibia University of Science and Technology and lecturer in the Faculty of Education at the University of Namibia. He has over 30 years of experience in professional development, educational leadership, curriculum and instruction, teacher education, education reform, policy development, monitoring, implementation and evaluation, student development, communication, education development, multidisciplinary research, and operated at top management level. Dr. Chivikwa holds a doctorate and master's degree in international development and education, as well as a bachelor in science education. As a passionate educator, he led several special projects in education, high-level capacity development, among many others. I now move on to reading his contribution for tonight. As an education specialist, I have been asked to give a short presentation on the following topic. Has Namibia education system set realistic benchmark as far as higher and tertiary performance targets are concerned? Allow me to make the following observation. The quality of education and level of employment in preparation remains poor in Namibia. The lack of skills among youth contributes to low economic growth in Africa, which manifested itself in low economic activity, low investment, and small labor market. The shortage of skills is viewed as the foremost challenge inhibiting Namibia's growth and stagnates it to get to a higher level on the development trajectory. It is emphasized that the reskilling of youth is inescapable and extremely necessary since the world economy keeps changing in dynamic ways. The education system must be reformed to address challenges in the basic education system as well as tertiary level in order to address the skills needed for socio-economic challenges facing the nation in the 21st century, with the encounters brought on by the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The paper makes specific recommendations for comprehensive educational reforms in order to address issues in a sector in a holistic manner rather than tackle them in a piecemeal fashion. We must aim to provide opportunities for the youth, for the young adults with no prospects to learn, develop, and advance so that they can become productive citizens, as many of them have no chance of entering university and colleges. We must take the position that young minds must be skilled, reskilled, nourished, and mentored beyond the corridors of formal classrooms at the early stages of their lives. It is also my philosophy that the intellectual ability of young people must be translated into practical outcomes that benefits them and their communities. He moved on to the first point, youth unemployment. One of the priority areas for Namibia to address is youth unemployment. Youth unemployment and youth empowerment and youth unemployment go hand in hand. A study report issued by the Brandhurst Foundation titled Putting Young Africans to Work, Addressing Africa's Youth Unemployment Crisis noted that the quality of education and levels of employment preparation remain poor. It is also noted that largely the urban unemployed youth and unskilled, and 60% of the urban employment is estimated to be in the informal sector, limiting their ability to contribute meaningfully to the tax revenue base and access to financing and market. It is noted that a youthful population gainfully employment will contribute to a lessening of inequality in income and access to opportunity. We must set realistic targets in regard to meet the needs of the population. Number two, skills and economic growth. Another issue that Namibia has to look at is skills and economic growth. The World Bank 2005 pointed to the fact that the shortage of skills is viewed as the foremost challenging inhibiting Namibia's growth and stagnated to get to the higher level of development trajectory. Also in the National Development Plans, Vision 2030 Harambee Prosperity Plan 1 and 2 and other important policy documents point to the fact that skills development should be prioritized to achieve economic transformation, youth enterprise development, and economic competitiveness. Recently, the World Bank also emphasized that reskilling of youth is inescapable and extremely necessary since the world economy keeps changing in dynamic ways and the active population cannot remain with the skills their entire lives. New skills contribute to new ideas and new ways of doing things, as well as adaptations. 3, future skills and attributes required. For the success of our youth and for the country to remain competitive on global standard, we must focus on skills required in the 21st century, which our basic and higher education system should focus on. Number 3, the new school curriculum. It appears that the new school curriculum is not skills-oriented. After all, this new school curriculum needs to have stirred up controversy once again in our education system. In particular, there are some poignant points that need serious attention and address. A, large number of grade 11 failures. Civil society and parents have rightly raised concern about the large number of failures of learners in grade 11 who will not make it to grade 12 and ultimately not proceed to university or other tertiary learning institution. The pass rate of 18% leaves much to be desired and indicates unsatisfactory results on a downward trajectory. To address the high failure rate, there is need to provide a new pathways to learners throughout the basic education system. A, for those who prefer the vocational route, and B, for those who cannot cope with academic stream. We also need to produce a sufficient number of teachers who can teach in the vocational stream. And then he moved on to number B, point B, structural changes at grade 11. It also appears that the structural changes at grade 11 present serious challenges for learners and the system as a whole. Originally, the idea was to issue a school leaving certificate, which will enable them to find jobs in the employment market. Right now, this idea seems to be a pie in the sky given the current economic situation. 4, higher education system. It is quite obvious that many of our youth are failing to get into higher education institutions for further studies due to the fact that, as a case in point, for the past decade or so, only 12% of those who took grade 12 examination could manage to get enough points to enter university. And after all, the following is also true. A, there is not sufficient space, as in the case of vocational institution, or B, as a result of poor grades acquisition and the exit level of basic education, for instance, grade 10, 11, and 12, and or C, lack of space in certain programs at university, D, lack of comprehensive introduction to career planning at school level, E, the absence of critical subjects, especially at senior primary and secondary school levels, and F, certainly the lack of teachers to teach those critical subjects, G, and learning teaching without sufficient materials, and H, the lack of proper technology infrastructure, and I, lack of poor access to technology. This leaves many young people without access to further learning, while the options for work of our youth in Namibia at the moment are very bleak. We must create a more robust higher education system that addresses issues of access, equity, equality, adequate financing in more comprehensive ways. The current system is antiquated to the current times and future socioeconomic requirements. It must be properly reformed, if not overhauled, to give consideration to future needs of our youth and desires created by the new economies. Since I have limited time, allow me to make the following recommendations. 1, early childhood development. Early childhood development is fundamental to the intellectual development of all human beings. Under ETSEP, early childhood education became an area of significance as the formative years of growth are viewed as critical to succeeding in primary, secondary, and eventually university settings. 2, access to general basic education. The recently reported lack of space and the number of learners seeking placement in school, especially for grade 1 and 5, is posing a serious threat to the long-standing principle of access for which Namibia has been revered across the globe. The lack of space creates unnecessary competition among schools-going children and puts a lot of stress on teachers and parents alike. Number 3, recommendation 3, the new curriculum. The new curriculum, which was introduced a decade ago, has now become full circle for learners to complete their basic education cycle. It has produced very poor results at grade 11 and few students are able to make it to newly created advanced subsidiary, which also produces a mere number of students to enter higher education institutions. The operational changes at grade 4 and 11 levels must be recrafted and reformulated. The levels of complexity must also be relooked at. In 2021 and 2022, the pass rate was 18% and 15% respectively. These results are dismal, and the entire system needs to be examined with serious measures to be implemented to, at the very least, mitigate the negative circumstances in the realm of our education system. Recommendation number 4, vocational and academic. The two streams must be properly adjusted in the new curriculum so that a balance is struck between academic and vocational streams. The vocational stream has been neglected, and a sufficient number of this subject must be made available in the curriculum in order to create pathways of choice for learners. Recommendation number 5, supply of vocational teachers. There is a shortage of teachers who can teach vocational subjects. The ministry must look into hiring graduates of STEM areas and convert them to become teachers to provide needed relief. This is an issue for further exploration, and there are no shortages of creative ideas. Recommendation number 6, the STEM areas. Namibia has to constantly gut and develop areas of science, technology, agriculture, and mathematics, and constantly improve on them to become competitive in a global economy. Recommendation number 7, the liberal arts and social sciences. While we are emphasizing the STEM, other areas of learning such as liberal arts and social sciences must not be forgotten to provide pathways for learning for the populace and deliver a comprehensive education at all levels, including university. Recommendation number 8, teacher professional development. Quality delivery of instructions require well-trained teachers who are supported through in-service programs that help them to maximize students' achievement. A strong professional development program for teachers must be formulated and implemented. The current piecemeal activities are deemed weak and not impactful. Recommendation number 9, the general education phase. A lot of wastage is still prevalent in the system in the form of dropout, leading to a significant decline in the number of students moving upward to complete their general education through grade 12, with little prospects of moving to tertiary education for their further studies. A national academic support system for all schools that focuses helping students and teachers succeed in teaching and learning must be developed with an eye on professional development, remedial education, tutorial, etc., while emphasizing critical thinking and creative thinking skills. Recommendation number 10, higher education. Since higher education holds the potential that is critical to the development of all fields, it is essential that a great investment be made in this field with a view to strengthen, create new higher education institutions, expand and reconstitute existing ones for the purpose of greater access for the youth, and serving the population in the acquisition of much needed qualification. The system needs to be supplied with sufficient quality graduates for the basic education phase. Recommendation number 11, second last, funding for higher education. Years ago, it was agreed that a funding formula for higher education be worked out and implemented. The proposition made then must be reconsidered and implemented, as the current funding is inadequate and not based on specific scientific findings, but on random arguments. Funding for vocational institutes must be increased to modernize those establishments and bring them up to world-class establishments. Final recommendation, student funding. The current system and administrative operations is reported to present many problems to students. Students' unions, parents, and the general public have made this clear. The NASFAF system must be overhauled to provide better access for financing students throughout their academic career. The current loan scheme must be changed to a grant or scholarship options that do not need to be repaid. This will help reduce the student loan debt, remove the financial burden on individuals who had initially signed up for it, and provide the needed relief for people who are mostly first-generation college graduates in their families. Closing. The education system needs help, especially with the negative issues that have crept in the school system, not least of which is drugs, alcohol, culture of resistance, explosion of shebeens in residential areas, etc., as is daily documented by teachers. In order for us to make informed decisions about what is needed and how the system of education should be reformed, short-term and longitudinal studies must be carried out on a regular basis to give us research-based evidence upon which action and policy will be decision will be grounded and formulated. We need a strong system that supports our teachers to become efficient in the classroom and provide quality education to our learners who will eventually become prospective students for higher education institutions. The number of students entering our universities and colleges is dismal, and that is because of the quality of education in the basic education system. This situation can be remedied for more investment in programs that will graduate our students to enter higher education institutions. In closing, to answer the question of whether Namibia education system set realistic benchmark as far as higher and tertiary performance targets are concerned, I say the verdict is out, and it is an emphatic no. We can do much better than that. I thank you. That was his contributions, and for those that are also interested, we've made enough copies for you to take along as well after the discussions. So I hand over to my colleague, Claudia. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis, for highlighting Dr. Chivikua's statement. And also, I think that the doctor answered one or two of our comments as well on Facebook. I mean, we are having a debate about how self-paced learning and homeschooling can be brought into the system as well when we are looking at the high failure rate, and we are looking at learners who are needing to pass the grades. So perhaps that's something that we can also keep in the back of our mind. I'm now not going to take up much more time. I would like to hand over for questions and comments from the floor. So perhaps we can have the mic. Thank you, NMH.
Good evening. My name is Cliff Olivier. I'm from Tucson. Just two comments. The first one is, teachers are the facilitators of learning. And while the universities have the lowest entry requirements for teachers than all the other qualifications, we will not get high quality teachers. I think that there's probably one of the places we should start. There's a lot of other things with teachers also that can assist us, but I think for that, it's important. Then also, Dr. Chivikwa mentioned 4IR. I think we are tinkering with an education system in a context of a revolution. There's a fourth industrial revolution happening, and we are working at an evolutionary pace. Because the fourth industrial revolution, people think it's about computers. It's not just about computers. The fourth industrial revolution happens when three things happen. There's a revolution in energy, like we have now, moving from coal to green energy. I mean, even in Namibia, we have green hydrogen moving forward. Our own country is moving forward in that. There's a revolution in transport. Very soon, I mean, already we have electric cars. We have driverless cars. I mean, think of a context where you don't need a driver's license anymore because you'll tell your car where to take you, These are just small little things that's happening. The next one is communication. How are we communicating with the children? How are we communicating with each other? There's Internet of Things, where computers are talking to each other, like your fridge talking to a computer at Pick and Pay to deliver milk because this milk is finished in the fridge. And it's not things that's happening in the future, it's now. I mean, we have many places where you have at night when you're sleeping, there's a machine that's vacuum your carpet. So your robot's going to start taking over work of the person who's working in your home. All repetitive jobs are going to be taken over by robots. This is a revolution where we are in. In terms of what's happening in the employment market in Namibia, is that our market is just too small to absorb everybody. I mean, in the 2018 labor force survey, and I don't know why they haven't brought surveys out later, but that one, there was already more than 12,000 university graduates unemployed. I'm not talking about engineers teaching, because there are a lot of them as well. I'm talking about people that are unemployed. 1/3 of the vocational training graduates are unemployed, according to that report. We are creating a bottleneck at the end of the education system that's going to cause problems for this country at the end, because now you're going to have educated unemployed people, and it's going to cause a lot of problems for us. So I think in terms of, and what Fourth Industrial Revolution does, it enlarges our employment market, because you can now sit in Namibia and you can work in New York and Japan and Germany, wherever you want, because of programming, because of cybersecurity, jobs like that we can start to do. These are the jobs, these are the skills that we should start creating from the word go in schools. This is the sort of thinking we should have. That's why I'm thinking that in our education system, we must stop this evolutionary change that we are busy with now, tinkering here and tinkering there with the grade, taking out grade 10, and we need to revolutionize our education system, because the context in which we are operating is a revolution. We cannot work on evolutionary pace while we are in a revolution. And we do not understand this. In Namibia, because our pace is slow, just look elsewhere. It is happening. I mean, even electric cars, who thought they would be here? They're already here. People using it, you see them driving in the streets in Windhoek. You know, these things are happening all the time. You already have people that are sitting here and working overseas. In that way, we can solve our unemployment problem if we start to create skills for our workers, our graduates, to be able to work overseas. But that means our skill level needs to increase so that we can compete internationally.
Mr. Oliver, we have to cut you short. Thank you very much. There's quite a large reaction on Facebook for your comments so far, and there are also a few of our readers or listeners asking what the digital programs are out there for teachers to learn more digital skills. So maybe something that we can keep us in the back of our mind. Let's move on to the next audience member.
Thank you very much for the platform. My name is Patrick Sam. I am an education specialist who's had the privilege to work with institutions like UNICEF as well as the government on various projects over the last 10 to 15 years. So it's been very interesting to look at, I find within the context of public debates, and the notion of being critical means that we have to look at what's working and what's not working. And I think it's important in terms of, if we talk about the spirit of education and knowing what happens internally from the education ministry's performance, is the public expecting the ministry to reform education or to transform society? And I think that's the question. And I think that the problem is we can all have a principled argument and a conversation that in principle, education must transform society. But that principle requires process. That principle requires a process that must come along with practices within a household, within an individual themselves, within a family, within a community, at a regional level, at a country level. And I'm sorry to say that somebody who has an eye on the inside, all of us, or the majority of us, want to outsource the well-being of our children. In spirit, people don't want to deal with the children. And then, when you outsource it, you say, how dare you come back with those returns? So the question is, what is your purpose? Or what is your role as a Namibian? What is your role then as a teacher? What is your role as a person in the community? I'll tell you, schools are struggling at a management level with school board members. People who have an insight in how to manage accounting of the school, and all of you are educated, but nobody is going to a school and saying, can I be a school board member? So is there a conviction within Namibians to say that I have a personal responsibility towards this education issue? Because the truth is, the system is responsible for schooling. The output which we all expect, the transformation of society, it is our collective responsibility. And so it is tiring to hear people who are spectators know the most and contribute towards problem proning and being problem prone. And when the government says, or the teacher says, we need aides at school to come cook, help the feeding program, nobody shows up. right? So this is not a technical question. This is a question about who's human. Are our children human? And we can become technical, and I'll give you an example. When Dr. Edabon was speaking, we spent $294 at an ECD level. Right now, what we call ECE, early childhood education, because we want to formalize it. And we spend, I wrote this down, $56,564 at a higher tertiary level. But the truth is, who are the voters? Is it the ECE children who are 3 or 4? So NASFAV money, I will be controversial, should go to ECE. Where is the public mobilization? Because we live in democracy, because there will be a backlash. We know that our system goes like this. We spend the least at the bottom, and too late we invest too much. That's why when the ED spoke about the study, the kids who passed are the kids whose parents had money to send them to ECD. So you know you live in an unequal country. You know the socioeconomics of this country. So now you are double troubling the kids. So if your parents don't afford you at the earlier, we are then going to give the ones whose parents afforded them ECE the opportunity to go to higher tertiary. So twice we're using public money to advantage the people who are privileged. So if we have to have a true conversation, my question would be, are we ready to shift NASFAV money to ECE? Because we'll prioritize our children's well-being and say that that's where the need is, and that's how we flip the costing model to say we're going to invest early enough. I don't think Namibia is ready to deal with the political repercussions of that, and that's not the responsibility of the ministry. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Patrick. I believe you opened a whole new wormhole for discussions. So.
Thank you. Just to continue where my colleagues have ended, I think there is one thing that as I'm always analyzing, in our context of education. When it comes to TVET, there is a stereotyping where TVET is regarded maybe for those that are not academically inclined, that they need to go to TVET, and we forget about that. That's where you need more intelligence in there. When there's a half area rate now in the higher education, then they say, no, let them go to TVET. There must be negotiation for these kids to come to TVET. So we are damaged. We are telling a story indirectly to say TVET is not so important. So, but however, TVET is where we're supposed to have those people that are intelligent so that they can be able to innovate, come up with new skills, innovative ideas, to manufacture cars and et cetera, et cetera. So that's where I just wanted to caution from our high-level officers, because usually when there's that half area rate, then they refer to TVET. I think as a country, we just need to look at things in totalities. And that's, for us, like we are lucky now that we have a revised TVET policy from the Ministry of Higher Education, which addressed from the inclusive education, even to see people with disabilities and people with, all the inclusive people, inclusivity in totality, I could say, how they can be also, articulate to mainstream TVET. So, and we are working on that activity. There are two activities in that TVET policy, which is very crucial. And one of them is to create pathways from basic to TVET to higher education, because as we speak, we do not have a structure of education system in the country here. So you have to negotiate. And I was fortunate to be at one point, we have to negotiate for our agri-TVET candidate to articulate to UNAM and to NUDAM. And there were different school of thoughts. People, the first question they ask you is that, what is your ND requirement? No, grade 10. Oh, sorry, no, for us, 26 points or 25 points in how many subjects? So we forgot about the aspect of the competence that the person have acquired. Not need to look at so when we are not progressing as a country, it's because it's us ourselves that make it start, because we are more focusing on one form of learning. There are 3 forms of learning: formal, informal, and non-formal. But in Namibia, it's mostly formal. If you do not have a degree, you do not have a master's, you are not recognized. We have a lot of people with skills in the community there that have acquired through informal settings. But yet we are neglecting those people and we do not want to recognize them. And that's where I would want us to focus. So, and maybe just to cut it short, the other aspect is that when you look at training, and I've been observing, so we are more, training becomes a lucrative business. I just want to take it I was a teacher, I'm a teacher by profession, I was trained as a teacher. In our time, teachers were very scarce to get. But now, if there's one vacancy for teachers, how many, one vacancy at school, how many teachers? There will be even 4,000 that will be coming there. So was there research that was done by our institutions like the UNAM and the higher institutions for them to do a research to say, no, at least we need to cut, we do not need to train more teachers now, we need to focus in other areas. But we continue training simply because we get NASFAF is paying. So it's a business. So we need to look at those and to avoid overpopulating of teachers and make sure that we focus in different areas as I've made. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we can, I think, final
Just a
question
comment,
and then,
please. No,
yeah,
it's not
okay.
Good evening, I'm Rachel Philander, Education and responsible for learners with special needs and disabilities. I just want to commend Dr. Shivikwa on his emphasis on skilled teachers teaching TVET. That is important. We did recently an investigation into the qualifications of TVET teachers with the help of UNICEF, and we found that there are qualified teachers who have the diploma, the degree, everything, but when it comes to the practical part, they don't have it. Okay, so that's why I appreciate that comment. Also, another thing is that I would encourage us to have a mind shift. We always speak about kids to enter the industry. For me, it should be our program that Mr. Amon spoke about now, is our kids with disabilities are trained into self-employment. That is also a new concept for me because during our investigation, we went to a small town and they offered office practice as a subject. And I asked them, but how will these kids get jobs? Because it's a small town, there's not enough offices. Then the answer was that the one girl started her own business. She developed wedding cards, invitations, and she's doing well. So I think if we have that in our minds, change that, you have to go to university and you have to go whatever we want to do, but focus on getting self-employment, strengthening the informal market as a result of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Philander. I think at this juncture, we are going to move on with our program, and we are going to look at the next item on the program, which is advocating for education reforms in Namibia, the role of the teachers' union and student organizations. And at this point, I want to welcome Lucia Dishishi from NANSO to make a contribution. And then after that, I think instead of opening questions, we're going to take on the teachers' union, and then we can just open the floor once for contributions and questions.
And as always, the advocates are only getting limited time as we are now already 15 minutes behind in our program. So, Lucia, no pressure. Try and keep to your 5 to 7 minutes, and also for the General Secretary. But of course, if we do not get through everything tonight, as always, for those who have joined us for previous debates, if you have any further questions, comments after the debate that are unanswered, please do take contact with us so that we can get in touch, get the answers, keep the debate alive. All right, let's see.
How much time?
7 minutes.
7 minutes, okay. Am I audible to the viewers? Okay, thank you. As introduced, my name is Lucia Ndishishi, President of the Namibia National Students Organization, and I was tasked with presenting on advocating for education reforms in Namibia and the role of student organizations. Sorry, I'm out of breath. But when I was preparing for this presentation, I felt that I can't only prepare for it from the perspective of NANSO, because it's really important for me to highlight the significance of the role of young people in general when it comes to advocacy work. Even speaking from the side of NANSO, albeit we are doing it from an institutional level, we do a lot of consultations, and I think from our side we try our level best to represent the actual and real views and reflections of young people. In this context, young people are also the receivers and the main stakeholders of the education sector. So it's very important, and I'm very happy that this specific topic is also part of this program. The purpose of this presentation is really to highlight the importance of education reforms in Namibia and the critical role of student organizations. Not only NANSO, of course in this context I'll speak for NANSO, but at an institutional level we also have SRCs, in schools we have LRCs, we also have youth leaders, student leaders and advocates in their various spaces. NANSO specifically plays a big role as it serves as the mother body. We call ourselves and we do our level best to really represent the views of all learners, trainees, and students within the country, studying within the country. I'll be discussing I'll touch on the current state of education in Namibia as well as its challenges. And then I'll also delve into the role of NANSO specifically, or what NANSO has really done in advocating for student rights and interests. Very briefly, for those of you that perhaps don't know and are hearing about NANSO for the first time, the Namibia National Students Organization, very popularly known as NANSO, is a youth-led, student-led organization whose primary and core mandate is advocating for the interest of and rights of all learners and students studying within Namibia and outside of Namibia. So we also do have representatives outside of the country. NANSO was founded in 1984 and has actively been advocating for education reforms in Namibia. I want to bring us to a point where our president, His Excellency Dr. Hage Geingob, at our last Congress, came and spoke about how NANSO was formed and how NANSO has witnessed a wide range of different generations and leaderships, and how there was a different fight in terms of armed struggle, pre-independence, and then setting up of the country, its structures and its systems, also speaking to transformation in trying to address some of the issues that they were fighting against during the liberation struggle. And now we have economic emancipation. He also spoke about how we are not using the same tools, but in some cases, where necessary, sometimes we have to be a bit aggressive and use the tools that were used back then. So NANSO's primary goal, like I said, is there to ensure that every Namibian child has equitable access to quality education. We try to see that there must be equitable access, and we are also trying to see that with this equitable access that you get into this education system, is it actually of quality? One major education reform that NANSO has been advocating for, like I said, is access to education. And that's why even when free education came into play, we welcome the idea, and that's why we advocate for it and we promote it, and we try to defend those that are still unable to get in, albeit it's voluntary fee. But even now, when you get into that system, is it actually of quality? Are you actually able to thrive in that system? Are you in a conducive environment that helps you thrive in that environment? I'll move on to the challenges so that I don't waste too much time. But our education system is facing a very wide array of challenges, and I think, albeit that the government is doing a lot, and there are interventions, there is still so much that has to be done. And that's why I'm very happy, like Patrick said, debates and platforms like this require us to really analyze and critique what is working and what is not working, and for us to be honest with ourselves. The first aspect in terms of the challenges, the biggest, I think, even for myself, is accountability. And I'm happy, I will refer again to Patrick, even with the results that came out. In NANSO, when we had our press release, when we were reflecting on the results that were announced in December, we looked at, or automatically it went to pointing fingers and shifting blame. But we felt as a leadership that the results was a reflection of our collective efforts. Education doesn't only take place in a classroom. There are different levels, there are different aspects that affect the entire education system of that child, from at home to in the classroom. So what's happening at home, what's happening in the classroom, what's happening in the school management, what's happening in the ministry as well. So there has to be accountability at all levels. And I'll repeat it, even when we said it in the statement, It might have seemed a bit aggressive, I know, even to the ministry, where we said that there must be accountability at all levels, including internally in the ministry, including the office of the minister. There must be targets that are set, and if those targets are not met, we must be honest with ourselves and reflect together and come to a collective, input decision type of way forward. But if we move into a direction where we are shifting the blame, pointing fingers, how are we going to address what is actually wrong if you are excluding yourself from the situation? So the first issue really is accountability. The second issue is, we've been repeating it, we welcome arms of government as well, calling for action towards that, but it's the inadequate infrastructure and resources. But we are speaking about it, but we want to see the implementation thereof. There are many schools in Namibia that lack basic infrastructure and resources, such as classrooms, electricity, clean water, abolition facilities, even as simple as chairs and tables. We are very privileged. We go on the ground, we do school assessments, and you find that in a classroom, 2 learners are sharing a chair, or they are standing, or they are sitting. It's conditions that are not conducive. It's conditions that have been there for the longest time. We've been receiving budgets, but how have we been trying to actually address this? And this is also really in rural areas, more especially in rural areas. Limited access to education and limited schools in general. Although Namibia has really made significant progress in increasing access to education, many of our children still do not access education, especially in rural areas. This is due to factors not limited to, but poverty, distance from schools, the lack of hostel spaces in schools, the lack of spaces in schools in general, harmful child practices, and other cultural barriers. You'll find even in a rural area, the nearest school doesn't have a hostel to accommodate your learner, your child. Okay, you go, or they don't have space rather to accommodate your child. You try and check at the nearest school, at the next village. Now they don't even have a hostel so that that child can be accommodated there. So what happens then? That's why we find, especially in rural schools, a lot of child-headed homes where you have fellow learners that are together without supervision, without guidance. There is nothing that's actually supporting them and helping them at the end of the day. The next issue, or challenge rather, is funding. And I'll break it into 2. It's financial exclusion and then funding in respect to the national budget. Financial exclusion continues to impede on a Namibian's child's ability to access education, not only to access education, but to finish it. So some of them, they get a chance, they get a sponsor, they get into the system, and then something along the way happens, and then you are excluded financially. It continues. Even though in schools we have free education in terms of tuition, there's still money needed for the school fee, for the school uniform, the school shoes, the stationery, the food, all the other things that actually are expenses for a parent or for a guardian. And then you have at institutions of higher learning as well, in terms of fees. Fees continue to move up. Fees, it's a financial exclusion for me is also very personal, because I even served as the SRC president for UNAM, and my biggest fight where I even became almost very disrespectful to elders was when I served during COVID-19 and they wanted to increase by 3.5%. And I was like, you already have people that are struggling, and now you are trying to increase amidst a pandemic. How, logically speaking, how is that going to work? So we still have our people, now the Namibian child, that is financially excluded. In terms of the national budget, adequate funding is very necessary to address all the issues that we continue to list year in, year out, that we are seeing every single year. We will have conferences, we'll have debates, and so on and so forth. And also, a lot of money, we always see that a lot is allocated usually to health and to education. So before we applaud what we have received now, we also have to look at what have we been doing with the lump sum that we've been already receiving in the last couple of years. Because for us also, we think that there isn't this lack of proper management of those resources and funds, as well as distribution of those resources and funds. And there's also no clear indication of who are they actually prioritizing, because you find our rural schools continue to get more and more dilapidated, more and more as the budget increases every single year. So even now, we welcome the budget increase. We applaud government really for giving education sector up to 20 billion. We welcome the call for construction of more classrooms, procurement of teaching materials, hiring of more teachers, especially for rural areas. We welcome construction of vocational training centers, and even the tax pardon upon low-income earners, because that, I think, also indirectly and directly affects our learners. But the implementation and the monitoring and the quality assurance thereof, how are we going to be assured, and what is the actual way forward, and how are we going to be holding the relevant people accountable for that? Because this is a lot of money. We've been receiving a lot of money, but what has been done and what are we going to do differently now that it has moved up, which is the most that we have seen? So there's also an issue with the capacity deficits that we've been speaking about in the new curriculum. So it takes me back as well to implementation, monitoring, as well as quality assurance, particularly in the AS at the advanced subsidiary level. Namibia faces a shortage of teachers. So you find schools don't have teachers, but we have a whole load of unemployed graduates that are ready to teach. Then there's the capacity deficit that exists in the teaching of the revised curriculum. Yes, there has been training that has been done during the course of the implementation of the curriculum, but I think a lot more still needs to be done. And we even hear it from teachers that are in training, that a lot more still has to be done. And some people actually are thrown in the deep end and they have to navigate and find their way. So if we don't address these things now already, with interventions that are taking place now and not in the long run, where we are just talking about it and we are saying there's this issue, we need to train, and nothing is actually being done, so that by the end of this year, we are not facing the same results, then we are going to be facing the same problems and singing the same song again at the end of the year, beginning of next year again. So it's very important that we monitor it and that we take these interventions very, very seriously. Yes, we have education conferences, we have meetings, and there are solutions that are brought forward. There are strategies that are brought forward, but where is the implementation thereof, and where are the results of that implementation? These interventions, how can we make them short-term to happen now, and also effective, so that our learners at the end of this academic year are not suffering the same things that they've been suffering previously? Further to that, institutions of higher learning must also ensure that all the teachers in training that leave universities with the required skills have the full understanding and appreciation of the new curriculum. It's very, very critical. I'll go into the importance very briefly of education reforms. They really aim to improve the quality and accessibility of education for students. They help address issues such as unequal educational opportunities, outdated teaching methods, and inadequate resources. Schools, institutions, and vocational training centers can also adapt to the changing societal needs and prepare students for future careers and promote lifelong learning. And education reforms can also help address issues of social justice and equity by providing marginalized communities with access to better education. In line of NANSO's role in advocating for education, as I stated, NANSO dates back to 1984, where we participated in pre-independence, post-independence, even until today. So NANSO has a long history of organizing protests, campaigns, engaging stakeholders, particularly government, presenting position papers, all the sorts. But we continue to try and also change our strategies to fit our now, our current, and we also try our best to involve as many people, as many young people that are affected. And that's also really the beauty of NANSO, that it's a student organization led by students. So the people advocating within the system are the ones that are receiving that education, are the ones that are in that system.
Okay. Unfortunately, we have to still move on.
All right.
If you can just close for us.
Okay.
Thank you.
In closing, I wanted to touch on the successes, but I think because of time, in closing, it's very important, and I think even this whole presentation really was to also inspire hope and also to encourage fellow young people and students to continue with the advocacy work and to not relent. Advocacy work is not easy, and you don't get the results now. Sometimes you get it even when you are out of the system, out of the student leadership, out of the youth leadership, but you shouldn't relent, and you should continue to use the voices. And it's also a call on those that are in decision-making platforms or spaces rather, that don't only give the young person or the student leader a platform to hear what they are saying, but actually take what they are saying into consideration and see how you can implement it for the better of the country, and in this context, for the better of the education system.
Thank you, Lucia. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lucia. We appreciate your inputs and also joining our discussion tonight. Just so before we move on to Mr. Mahongora Kavehua, Secretary General of the Teachers Union of Namibia, how many members does NANSO currently have in Namibia?
We moved up, recorded 100,000.
All right,
Yes,
it's quite a few and very active youth. And I think also if you want to follow NANSO and ask them questions directly, as I can see there is a lot going on in terms of the importance of LRCs and how the Basic Education Act of 2022 is tackling this in schools and how NANSO is involved. So also if your questions are unanswered at this stage, please feel encouraged to take up contact with NANSO's Facebook page as well and get in touch with them. They are quite interactive when it comes to advocacy work. So if you are not able to get a hold of the panelists, as mentioned, please get in touch with us. I'd like to now hear from the Secretary General for the Teachers Union of Namibia, Mr. Mahongora Kavehua. We want to find out, as one of the representatives of teachers in Namibia, how do you influence education policy and what outcomes, if any, could you share with the audience briefly before we move to comments and questions and with that close for the evening?
Thank
Over
you
to
very
you.
much for the opportunity that the CAS have created for us to dialogue on this matter. The question is whether there is a space for non-state actors to carry out advocacy work. I don't know, I will leave it there. However, Namibia is one of the countries that we are cursed, I think so. For the past 30 years, we have been hiding behind colonialism. Now we started a new wall that we are going to hide behind for the next 30 years is coronavirus, for our failures. We have been very instrumental in terms of carrying out advocacy work, especially during the development of the current Education Act. Our submission was very straightforward to say that now we are 30 years experience in terms of what we want to take Namibia to. The Education Act should become one of the crucial instruments that we can be well crafted so that it can take Namibia forward. But to our surprise, the Education Act became an instrument that started rewriting another progressive laws, being Public Service Act, tried to copy, and if you go to some of the topics, chapters that are dealing with lifelong learning, you will be surprised how they define lifelong learning. You will be surprised. And that was uncovered through our advocacy work where we call the adult or lifelong learning practitioners at the national conference in Swakopmund, where we interrogate the whole chapter. And we realize that the person who was writing this chapter, there are two issues there, whether he's having a very little knowledge about lifelong learning, or he was maybe coming straight from a Chibin. The problem that we are faced with in the education sector is a human-made. And I like my sister to talk about efficiency. Education system is lacking leadership. From top to somewhere. Somewhere is because some of the areas is of my interest. From top to somewhere. So if we make sure that we address the issues of education, the leadership in education, most of the problems will be resolved. The other component is the issues of the in-service training policy. We've been advocating for this. I think that the Deputy Executive Director here will attest to it. There is no way that you can train a teacher, you put that teacher in a classroom, and then you live with him or her forever. If that teacher at the university was pronouncing chemistry as chemistry, he will continue chemistrying the kids for 30 years without being refreshed. And education is a dynamic process where you need to refresh. But this is not happening. And that's why we have a problem with even the current system, the revised system. It's because there's no policy. Now the teachers were trained in a mispill, as Dr. Chivuga have said, processes. Now, if you don't have a policy in professional development, it means you are unable to appropriate fund for it. Only if there is a funds there or there is a donation from CAS, then I will have called the teachers together to do so. Because there is no systematic planning. But we are still campaigning and advocating for it. Hopefully, if it's not Vision 2030, they will start developing that policy now. And that wells also to the issues of e-learning. Because they are not even contemplating, trying to come up with a policy on e-learning, which will talk to the issues of assessment, issues on many more other issues on how to introduce e-learning. We go to the issues of research that was raised here. And that is a disease in Namibia. You heard even when you were debating about FEMA, apparently there is a research, you say, give us the copy of the research. It's nowhere to be found. It's the same thing. Everybody come up with whatever's, where he read it or she read it, and then he said that, no, tomorrow we're going to do ABCD without proper consultations. Then we go to the issues of school fittings. We've been saying that taking school fitting versus basic income grant, which one is more sustainable? And which one will kill more birds than this small school fitting program? So we need to look at the policy level. And then moving to TVET, I like the comment that he made, that TVET is not for less performing. But unfortunately, that word is being now misused in the sense that TVET requirements are now becoming equated to the exit of a secondary school level. If a UNAM asks E in English, TVET will ask F. Can you see now? If UNAM asks 25 points, TVET will ask 24. But TVET is supposed to be a skills development where even a learner drop out in grade 7 can enter TVET. But nowadays, you have to reach grade 12 for you to go to TVET. Because the notion to say that they are all equal is not true. The academic have his own ways and skills development have its own ways. We go to the other comment. For us, the educationist, teaching is a skill. It's not an academic gifted kind of things. It's a skill. And that's why the mistake that we have done is to abolish the teachers' training colleges. You can be an A student in grade 12, but you cannot be a good knowledge transmitter. Forget about it. So that's where you have to master the skills of teaching, and then you develop a passion towards the field, And then the content can come later. Through capacity building or staff development programs and other incentives where you can send them, okay, go and do this course in mathematics or whatsoever. That is what we call teaching. For you to think that, no, I will bring the requirement of a teacher to the requirement of a lawyer, then I can produce good teachers, you are mistaken. So it's very important that we need to debate this. Lifelong learning issues, I've raised to it that we need to define what the lifelong learning is in Namibia. The problem that we have, that's why we have a backlog of those that are graduating, go and sit there, backlog that are falling out in the system, backlog of those of TVET, because the component of lifelong learning is not there. And it is explicitly, nicely defined in the Future of Work, ILO Future of Work report, which emphasize on the issues of skilling, reskilling, and upskilling. And I thought our education, and we talk about lifelong learning, it will borrow these some ideas, rather than the narrow way where they link lifelong learning to basic education. That's how they define it in the education that is coming. So what are we busy with? We are busy with distorting, we are busy with creating an environment where each and every individual operate at your corner. There is no clear articulations and coordinations. And I like Sam. The one thing that the politicians, after independence, have done successfully was to install fear among the citizen, to create a culture of ignorance and passive participation. And that's why our parents are not coming to meetings. They don't challenge system. The student organizations, they don't challenge the system. They only hear them when they're talking about NASAF. But for them to say that, can we join the parents and join the teachers union if the class is overcrowded? NANSO tell the student to say that, don't enter that class. Our members will not be taught in the overcrowded classrooms. The teachers union, we tell our members that if the class is overcrowded, refuse to get into that class. The parents tell their children that if the class is overcrowded, my child will not be taught there. Then we can talk about quality. But the politicians have succeeded in ensuring that we have a culture of ignorance. And that will live with us for a long period. And leadership is about inspiring, not about installing fear. And that is what politicians have done in this country. That's why everybody is afraid. When you make a truthful statement in public, the next question, are you not fearing to die? To die for what? You go to address the teachers. I was afraid because I'm afraid, can we go out there so I can tell you what's the problem with the school? This is happening. So now, how can we bring a culture of ownership that, no, the Namibia is mine, everything that will happen in Namibia, I have to stand and I have to confront so that we can get good things. And that's the only way we can hold our leadership accountable. To conclude, mind you, there is this 500 million given here with corruption, which always, corruption is the one that is distorting our priority and is the one that is frustrating everybody. This money will be spent, all the classroom will be left half, and the problem will be COVID again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kawihua, for your contributions. I see that Ms. Bond is smiling. Okay, let me, for a few minutes, maybe open up the floor for your final contributions because we have got to come towards the conclusion. What I will do, I will allow you to come up with comments and contributions for a few minutes, and then we'll allow Ms. Bond and Lucia to make their final comments, and then we can wrap up for the discussion tonight. Wow, the interest is a lot. Maybe we can start with the Ombudsman, please, sir.
Yes, thank you. And good evening, everyone, and I appreciate the panel members. It is very, very educational. I don't have a specific question, but probably just a comment. I don't also complain because I received too many complaints. And it's making my head too white so soon. I think the panelists and the participants have really highlighted the challenges that this country is facing in terms of education. They talked about the important dimensions of quality education, the obstacles to quality education, and factors that affect learning. And when you look at what they highlighted, it's truly everyone or the second person have mentioned a very important issue here, and that is really poverty, hunger, lack of access to clean water and sanitation and overcrowding in schools. I think those ones are really at the center of our challenges. And if you read the book written by a non-African, Eric Johnson, Dr. Johnson wrote a very good book, Teaching with Mind in Poverty. It will tell you what the last panelists have talked about, that teachers is at the center of this success. You know, as a teacher, you have to focus in your class by focusing on those poor children. And when we talk about poor children, it includes everything, you know. Poor in understanding things so quickly, or poverty from home. So as a teacher, if you are trained teacher, like the last panelists have said, you will pick these things up. And I think those are the centers of our challenges in this country. So we can run away from those facts, but I think the other issues, we don't need to repeat it, because the environment is very, very important. You can see that the best performing schools in this country is those with the better facilities, and there's no two ways about it. So I think what is also clear is that it was mentioned that education is a business, and it is a business in the whole world, because of WTO have decided that goods and services is going to be global services everywhere. So I think what the leaders should do, and I'm just very, very, very hesitant now to talk about leaders because I actually engage them. They should take business in education and in health sectors. I think the last panelists have mentioned it, that when you want to embark on building infrastructures, you just have to do it yourself and not really go into the business of entrepreneurship, because that will not take you anywhere. You will just be at one spot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Since you have already contributed, I will come back to you. Fatsai, you want to contribute? I'll come back to you.
Contribution is very short. I want to say that the Namibia that I hope to see is one where, after a public debate like this, we action plan. We go back, and the next time we meet, we're implementing everything we have spoken about and actioning all these plans and actions. And lastly, I just want to refer everyone to a quote by Kofi Annan, former United Nations diplomat. He says, "The issues of young people, the problems that young people face, are known by young people. So these learners have the answers for the way forward." I would like to say that we don't have at least 80% of those answers, but they do. So let's take surveys to them. Let's talk to them. Let's find out what their challenges are, what their issues are, and let's allow them the grace to speak openly and freely and not create an environment where they feel there's too much pressure. So they have the answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the gentleman at the back. May I also request that you also summarize your contribution very briefly so that we can accommodate more people?
Thank you very much. My name is Ishmael. I represent an upcoming TVET, and I'll say this maybe from the context of having worked at the two higher education institutions as an HOD. I think the education sector in Namibia really needs reform. Reform in the context, I think I don't want to repeat what others have already said. It really needs to have a big reform. Not every child needs to go to university. I'll tell you one thing that I've seen is that most kids at the universities fail to progress on time because they're struggling with math, they're struggling with accounting. I know most of you know accounting 1B or math. It keeps you in university longer, isn't it? So I really think that not every child needs to be forced to do math. In fact, I like what is already been put forward. There needs to be a balance between who goes to university and why they are going to university. Namibia needs scientists, but what we are producing are not scientists. We need people to go to TVET. Right now, I'm telling you, with all the discoveries that are in Namibia, Chinese are going to come and take over. Sorry, my French. Because we don't have the workforce. I'll give you an example of Tanzania, for example. They have got the manpower. That's why it has become a hub for manufacturing. We are talking about value addition. We don't have people to do value addition to the resources of Namibia. So TVET, really, I like the context part, and I like the fourth revolution part, green skilling. I'm hoping that the lady, I don't envy her job in the ministry, for sure. It's a tough job. One thing that you need to be really considering is, instead of being reactive, you need to be very proactive as a ministry. People are talking about accountability. There needs to be a think tank for education. The same way the national curriculum framework works, programs are reviewed every 5 years. Education needs to be very dynamic in its reviews, right? So that at least it caters for every child. There should be woodwork at schools, at primary school. There should be metalwork at primary school. Not every child needs to be doing math. There needs to be just literacy of math, literacy of English, literacy of science. But not everybody needs to do high-level mathematics. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Also, I just want to mention that for disclaimer purposes, we have engaged all the ministry, the ministry that we have here tonight and the higher education ministry as well, although unfortunately, due to space and also availability, they could not join us. We have been in touch with the Ministry of Higher Education for quite some time on different elements. And if you do have any questions toward the Ministry of Higher Education, as well as UNISA, NAST, and some of the other tertiary institutions, please do engage with CAS. Also feel encouraged to after this debate, take up contact with them as well. Yes, should we with that then... We don't have any further comments. We do, but I think we are out of time, and for the sake also of our program, I think we're going to take one final comment and then call it with that for the closing remarks and a bit of a networking session. So over to you, sir.
I'm sure I can speak without a mic. Am I loud enough? Okay, thank you so much. At the end of the day, it's not really all doom. There's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel. But before we end and we reach the end of the tunnel, I think what the union is saying here is that we need to speak nothing but the truth. You see, we are blessed. We have a bit of everything which we desire in quantity. We have enough money. We have too many qualified teachers. When people say we don't have teachers, actually the truth is we have too many teachers who are qualified and they have degrees, honors degrees in education. But the question that the union is saying here is, are these teachers suitably and appropriately qualified? You see, as a parent, I get invited too many times for graduation ceremonies. I check what my nephews are graduating in education. Someone has a degree in education, honors, to teach geography. Then another nephew has a degree education honors to teach biology. Check the transcript. The transcript is full of English 1, English 2, and 2 English 5. Then there's English for teachers 1 again up to 5. Then there are all manner of history of education 1, history of pre-colonial history. This is a geography teacher. This is a chemistry teacher. Then it's psychology of teaching learners, all manner of things in the transcript. Then as a parent, I'm struggling to look for, you are going to be teaching geography. Where is the geography in your degree, which is at honors? The geography there, if you find it, it will not be geography. It will be methodology of how to teach geography. If you're looking for mathematics, you will not find the mathematics. It will be mathematics education, but at honors level. So what it means that we are teachers who are highly qualified, but probably not suitably and appropriately qualified to teach geography, because they don't have, in the content of the degree at honors level, there's very little geography, there's very little mathematics. And if you are a parent, once they go for masters, the story is very obvious. They will not go for masters in geography or masters in mathematics, because they will not have done mathematics at university, because if they enter a Bachelor of Science with mathematics, they will not graduate. So the easy option is to go and say, I'm doing science to teach science. So they do a B.Ed honors, where everything in the transcript is about English for teachers, English 1, then there's a lot of psychology, there's a lot of philosophy. You look for what they are going to teach. It is the methodology. So at the end, what we are saying is, because we have decided to produce a professional, competently qualified teacher, not someone who has the content, it means that the ministry has to invest a lot in these teachers if they are going to teach the mathematics. And that is now where it becomes very difficult. Because once you are certified, you are qualified, you cannot come to me and tell me I can't teach physics or science. So we that have children, what we have seen, if my child is doing physics and chemistry, I will not let them to be taught by my own nephews. I will hire someone to teach them the chemistry. Because I know for sure that the person with an honors cannot deliver in the physics and the sciences. So what Amon is saying here is the way we train teachers, I think we have spoken about these things from 1995 with the Nahas Angola up to today. Too much of quantity. Now, quality and quantity are not bedfellows. It's nice to have everything in quantity and everything, but at times, I would rather have 2 teachers who can teach chemistry than have 4,000 teachers who can hardly teach, but they can just read the chemistry. So I think the problem that we have is the teachers. He was just talking about now we have pre-vocation and we have everything. But who can teach pre-voc? Because in 1995-96, we had all these schools that were technical schools. We closed them because we all wanted to become lawyers, to become what and become what. So now then suddenly the ministry says we want to start pre-voc from school. So who is going to teach that? Because we closed that for 20 years. There was no one who has been doing metal fabrication, woodwork. These things were there in the old, but we closed them.
Thank you.
So what we are saying is this. If we do not address and speak the truth about the teachers that we have, these 4,000 so many teachers, they can hardly teach the subject for which they are qualified and competently certified. And once they graduate, as the union is saying, once you drop them in a pool, they will never have what we call professional development. And whatever money we put, these debates we have here, if I can't teach, what do you expect? The obvious.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I think thank you for the audience for your comments. I think it will only be fair if we can now allow our panelists to just offer your closing remarks so that we can move on to the... Yeah, please.
Just to touch on what was said, all is not doomed. I agree. Yes, we have, followed the trend of the weak results already a year ago. This is January the 12th of 2022, before the results of 2021 were released. So that is when we decided, let's engage with everyone. And that is where the regional consultation started. Only afterwards, towards the 12th of February of 2022, the Transforming Education Dialogue reached us from the UN. So that, just to put in context, what we have done already from January was exactly this debate. We initiated it in the Ministry of Education. So we have a conference report, which, you know, the TESS initiative amalgamated all of this, similar to what we are doing here, into a conference report. And that report has over 40 recommendations. They are approved by the by Cabinet. We are busy doing the implementation plan. We have costed it. Yes, we are everywhere attacked for throwing only dollars at what we need. We fully embrace that internal efficiency has to improve, do more with less. That is the motto on which we are working already, but I agree, not at the expense of numbers, and these are the teacher-learner ratios that must be right, and of course the material resources. And these include, you know, uplifting all to the same standard. I think I thank you very much for your patience, and until we meet again, thank you.
Lucia, do you want to?
Yeah, no, just...
Lucia, before you continue, please keep it short.
Yeah.
You have an opportunity to see Lucia also. She's going to be part of a Generation C show, I believe, tomorrow or Thursday. NMH can correct me if I'm wrong. Where we're going to talk more to Lucia and, of course, also our director regarding the debate we've had and the outcomes we've shared. As you've heard, we like to take action, we like to implement. So, Lucia, over to you.
Okay, thank you. I think from my side, very briefly, is we just look forward to seeing the implementation. A lot of Namibians have contributed to dialogue and discourse. We want to see the implementation thereof and the fruits thereof. And also really just a call on the nation for us to all hold hands. Like I said, it's a collective effort, and we shouldn't single out only teachers or the government or parents, but I think the responsibility lies on all of us as citizens. Yeah.
I think my concluding remarks is that we need to build this delinking between what we are thinking and what we are doing. We all say things here, all good things. When we just enter our office, we start doing opposite. If we start coordinating the hand with the brain, Namibia will be very far. And I like the comment that the Ombudsman have said, that have been all our positions. Both education and health must be not regarded as expenses within the physical. They must be financed straight by physical. Free education and health from a child when he or she is conceived. When the father and the mother finish in the bedroom, now we have a child that is there. The government must take care to that person until he ends up in a grave. And that's not expenses. It's in fact the responsibility of the state. But these things are not being taught at the university. They have been distorted in terms of introduction with the many capitalist, short-sighted ideas and all those kind of things. So the other one is the issues of, as one of the speakers here spoke about the issues of why we get away with the grade 10. It's not because of Vision 2030. It was a clear recommendation from the first education conference that we need to get away with 2 exit points. So we can only 1 exit point, grade 12. But the government, I don't know what is good in exiting the kids out earlier in the system. They only improve the exit point from 10 to 11, and they give a name, and they try to do all the justification under the sun, which is not the truth. So basically, you, the parents, you have a duty to stand up and say that let's get away with the exit point of grade 11. Everybody goes. There you have two streams, ordinary, AS, or yes, and then you continue doing those kind of things. To conclude, consultation, social dialogue is the most important. Not selective social dialogue. You call a person to the meeting, when you realize that this person have a very hard convictions on the matter, next meeting you don't call. That's how it has been happening. It applied with us with the COVID-19 with the Ministry of Education. The first 3 meetings they call us, they realize that this union have a position and they know what they want to do. From there, luckily then I went to the village and I was locked at the village, which is very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Before I hand over to my colleague, I just also want to mention that for the speech and the contribution of the doctor, my colleague Chao Li is outside if you want to have a copy, and also to provoke some of the discussion and also to take some of the points that has been highlighted there. So, Claudia?
Thank you very much, Dennis, also for co-moderating, for the panelists, for your inputs. We have some really positive comments on Facebook also that the dialogue tonight was quite fruitful, and that there are just hopes that implementation is going to be visible and that everyone took notes. So from there, I think we can, with that, thank also the audience for coming tonight, and especially a big thank you to the CAS team who were in the background just preparing everything with us, to the interns and the Mr. Viljo Motorta and Sonja Poller and the rest of the team, and also to NMH for airing this for us tonight. Without you, it would not have been possible to reach broader Namibia, and also to Selma. I don't know. I know how Selma's arms have not grown big muscles by this time, but she's been doing a great job so far. And yes, with that, let us hand over to the director of the foundation for the closing remarks.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's on. Mr. Kaviua, definitely we will invite you again. No worry. Well, I will keep it really short since time is already progressing, and yeah, we really take a lot of important points on this discussion. We mentioned, for instance, the conducive environment which learners and students need in order to right. And also the quality and assurance system must be implemented within the education system, the school inspection, just to mention. And moving forward, also TWET is another aspect to look at closer and to develop. I think we shall not think that is something minor or something less valued or something like that. It's just another way of the education, and we need all the Namibians in the economy. So, yeah, as we, Konrad Adenauer Foundation, it's our mandate to promote democracy, and education belongs to democracy. And there's a finding that in nations where the education system is quite developed, also democracy has a better environment to survive and to develop further. So there's a connection with it. And it's also our mandate to have debates, to, even if they're controversial and painful sometimes. It's not an easy topic here, but we have to tackle it, we have to discuss it openly and invite all parts of the nation. It's from the government side, from the different institutions, from the learners, from the students, organizations, and this is how society should communicate and to develop and to think of and to find ideas and to contribute to the solutions. And I think it's time for action. We have analyzing it a lot. Maybe not, we can have another debate about it and maybe find more points. But I think it's time to action. And I really like to quote Cliff Olivier, Mr. What you did say about we need to revolutionize our education while we are in the revolutionary or industrial time now with revolution. So I think it's we have to do more than just just to improve here and there a little bit. It needs to be a revolution, indeed. Yeah, the world out there is going so fast. Yeah, And also the fear that Chinese could take over things, it's already happening. Not only in Namibia, it's all over. So I think we really have to catch up. And this, it's also a matter of speed at the end of the day. So yeah, we will continue with this type of dialogues. And I'm looking forward also to the next topic. If you have any ideas or wishes, or you think it's really worth to sit together, and yeah, our doors are open. And as I said, this room, this conference hall is not just for our team meetings, not just for our office purposes. It's exactly for debate like this. And I thank you very much. And we have enough of food of thought, and outside there are real food. So please serve yourself and enjoy. And yeah, enjoy also the time for networking if time still allows. And I thank you very much, and looking forward to see you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.